Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna continue the story What If Fem Kurama Was Naruto's Mother, Part 3. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
On this day, Naruto stood in the middle of his normal clearing overseeing a sparring session between Hinata and Sasuke. The two were in the middle of the clearing exchanging blows at a rapid pace. Hinata, despite being one of the most knowledgeable in class, still was far behind Sasuke when it came to actual combat, and especially now since he trained so much harder than her. But Naruto had plans to even the odds. Hinata let out a sharp shriek as her body hit the ground. She braced herself and lay on her side panting heavily. Sasuke stood above her with his arms crossed. An audible scoff heard from him. The raven-haired boy then glanced over to Naruto. "This isn't really fair. She still isn't at my level, especially since you won't let her use her Hyuga gentle fist strikes," Sasuke said in annoyance. Hinata had her Byakugan flared, the girl getting up slowly to regain her fighting stance, facing one palm towards Sasuke. Naruto was off to the side adorning his normal robe, his hands tucked into his sleeves in front of his body. The boy just had a soft smile across his face before walking towards them. When seeing Naruto approaching, Hinata nearly panicked. "I can take it, Naruto-kun. I know that this is to train my endurance and speed, and I'm not ready to practice with my chakra yet," Hinata blurted out while looking to Naruto with a concerned expression. She didn't want to disappoint him. When hearing her words, Naruto sent the girl a gentle smile. "Oh, you are doing wonderfully, Hinata-chan. I've just decided to take the training to another level for both of you," Naruto explained while stopping in front of Hinata and moving a soft hand forward to gently caress her cheek. Hinata's body relaxed under that touch, the girl standing up from her fighting position. Sasuke quirked a brow at Naruto's words. "To the next level?" Sasuke asked in interest. By this time, Hinata and Sasuke had been training with Naruto for about 2 weeks. He hadn't even taught them any new jutsu, mostly just making them run exercises and spar while listening to his lectures on various advanced topics. Naruto turned his head to glance over to Sasuke. "I think it's time. I have a pretty decent sense now of what you both are ready for," Naruto said before walking over to Sasuke with that usual sway. By now, Sasuke had gotten used to Naruto's personality, having spent so much time around him. But he still couldn't help gazing away whenever Naruto looked towards him so intensely. Sasuke just kept his arms crossed. "So what's next then? I don't feel much stronger since being trained by you," Sasuke stated in a disappointment. "I already do most of these exercises on my own. All these exercises were mostly for me to get an accurate read of your strength. Now that I know your limits, the real training begins now," Naruto said while reaching 2 fingers forward and pressing them against Sasuke's forehead. Sasuke stared at Naruto's fingers with an apprehensive gaze. "What are you?" But before he could finish his sentence, Sasuke felt a huge weight suddenly hit his body. Instantly, he dropped down to one knee, the boy gritting his teeth. Hinata let out a gasp from Sasuke's sudden apparent strain. Sasuke's entire body was shaking, barely able to look up to Naruto, who still stood above him. "What did you do to me?" Sasuke asked in a strained voice. His entire body ached. Naruto maintained that gentle smile. "I just made everything 20 times harder. This is a special training jutsu that I use. Of course, it's modified for you. I've basically strapped weights to your muscles. But not only that, to your chakra points as well. Right now you are barely going to be able to fight. Try to get up, Sasuke," Naruto instructed, which caused Sasuke to attempt to lift his body only to fall back onto one knee. "What the hell? I can't even move," Sasuke stated in a growl while continuously trying. "Be calm, Sasuke. Stop trying to move," Naruto instructed. After a bit more struggle, Sasuke nodded and relaxed his muscles, still maintaining his kneeling position. Naruto dropped down on his knees as well to be on the same level as Sasuke, so they were both kneeling. Naruto didn't want to make it seem like he was forcing Sasuke to kneel before him. "What was one of the first things I taught you when you became my student?" Naruto questioned. Sasuke looked up with a confused stare before answering. "You taught us to run up trees," Sasuke replied back. Naruto just nodded his head happily. "Yep, you say you don't feel stronger, but you are most faster and stronger than you have ever been. You may not notice it because the change is gradual, but I have been preparing your body and your chakra for this. This training will grow with you. It's meant to strengthen your body and your chakra. It's meant to train you to use your body and your chakra in true harmony," Naruto lectured on. Sasuke still held a confused look. How is weighing me down supposed to help my chakra? He barked back in an annoyed tone, still unable to move much. But Naruto was very patient and never let his smile leave his face. Because your chakra will help you move. Close your eyes, Sasuke, Naruto instructed. Sasuke was again hesitant but did completely. Now think of what it was like to climb those trees, to control the chakra in your feet. Think about how the chakra moved in your body. In the same way, I want you to will your body to move and tell your chakra to help you. Disperse your chakra through your entire being, to every muscle you can think of. Think of your legs, your feet, your head, your neck, your shoulders, your arms, your heart, your lungs. Everything. Chakra is the energy of life. It is every bit as essential to life as is breathing. Is it every bit as important as your muscles? Harness it and stand, Naruto said in a firm manner. Sasuke took a while, his brow furrowed in concentration. Behind them, Hinata was standing a ways away, watching in fascination. Her eyes widened when she suddenly saw Sasuke stand from his kneeling position with far more ease than before. Sasuke was releasing controlled breaths, his eyes still closed as he stood on his feet. Finally, he opened his eyes, seeing Naruto's smiling face. How does it feel, Sasuke? Naruto asked while reaching his hand tentatively to run the back of his fingers along Sasuke's cheek. But this time Sasuke didn't shy away from the touch. There was something different, the way he felt. He'd never felt this way before. He felt a connection to himself that he'd never experienced. I can't even describe, Sasuke whispered in a disbelieving manner before letting his eyes glance down to Naruto's hand which caressed his face. It felt different. He felt ... one. Sasuke actually closed his eyes and leaned into that gentle caress. From behind, Hinata went wide-eyed at the sight, fidgeting with her hands now. She was so confused. We are one, Sasuke. It's just that most people can't see it. Even the strongest among ... us. Naruto stated that last word hesitantly. By us he meant humans. But even now, despite Sasuke's epiphany, Sasuke still only had a taste of the true oneness of life. A limitation of Sasuke's humanity. Sasuke-kun, I'd like you to fight Hinata now, Naruto said while pulling his hand back and stepping to the side. Sasuke suddenly snapped, his eyes opened and looked to Naruto with a disbelieving expression. But I can barely move, Sasuke stated in distress. Naruto just chuckled softly. Up until now you've just been using your chakra to move. Now use your muscles and you will find yourself even more free. And as you fight and train this way, you will gain a deeper understanding and control of your own body and chakra, Naruto stated. Upon hearing that, Sasuke gritted his teeth as he forced his body into his fighting stance. He was able to move after straining his muscles. Naruto noted that strain. He would pace the training so Sasuke wouldn't pull any muscles or overdo it. Naruto then moved over to Hinata, who was watching quietly by herself. The girl bowed her head when seeing Naruto approaching. Should I attack now? Hinata asked in a tentative whisper. She'd grown stronger as well, even if she didn't notice it. Not yet. You're ready as well, Hinata-chan. And you may actually find this easier to deal with because your chakra control is superior to Sasuke's, Naruto explained in that soothing, sultry voice of his while placing 2 fingers against Hinata's forehead. The girl waited patiently before going wide and shrieking as she fell on both fours, the weight of her body dragging her down. Hinata didn't take as long as Sasuke did to adjust, closing her eyes and controlling her breathing as she shakily stood up on 2 feet. Sasuke watched in amazement at how fast Hinata adapted, gritting his teeth in frustration, the boy gaining even more determination. When Hinata finally opened her eyes, she also was met with the smiling face of Naruto. But before Naruto could ask how she felt, the girl leaped forward and wrapped her arms around Naruto's neck, embracing him in a warm hug. Naruto quickly wrapped his arms around her waist, having no problem dealing with how heavy her body was at the moment. Naruto-kun ... it's so beautiful. Thank you, the girl whispered in a tender tone before pulling her head away, and suddenly pressing her lips against Naruto's to the surprise of everyone, including Naruto. About a half-mile away, across from the stream where Naruto's clearing was, Midnight and Kyuubi were sparing in their demonic forms. There was a powerful genjutsu around the area that concealed their positions. Kyuubi used her summon form to train Midnight. They were standing opposite each other, palms outstretched towards each other as a swirl of dark red chakra swirled between them. It was a battle of chakra, and while that was extremely intense for Midnight since she had to compete with Kyuubi, the training greatly enhanced the power of Midnight's chakra, and since demons were much more in tune with their chakra than humans, they gained more from chakra training. But both of them snapped out of their intense stare down when Hinata kissed at Naruto's lips, both being able to see the activity with their enhanced vision. Well. Kyuubi stood up straight, taking a sultry posture while watching the activities with an amused gaze. Midnight stood up as well, moving to Kyuubi's side and canting her head to the side. She is eager, Midnight stated in an amused tone. Kyuubi looked down to Midnight with a raised brow. Do you think Naruto will kiss her back? Kyuubi asked in interest, watching Midnight's reaction carefully. Midnight simply tapped a single finger against her lip in thought before shaking her head. I don't think Naru-kun is ready for that yet, but I suppose we'll see, Midnight stated matter-of-factly. Kyuubi moved behind Midnight and wrapped her arms around the small demoness waist, leaning down to nuzzle her cheek into Midnight's. Let's watch, Kyuubi cooed. Naruto looked down at Hinata with a wide gaze, that kiss lingering for a time. He still maintained his hold on her, not pulling back until she did. Hinata was frozen, not really expecting for her body to do that. Oh my god, I'm kissing Naruto-kun, and he isn't pulling away. Should I? What do I do now? Hinata thought to herself before finally the strain of her muscles and chakra got the best of her. She fell away from his embrace and bowed her head, bunching her hands up against her own chest. Sorry, the girl whispered sheepishly. Naruto watched her carefully with his head cocked to the side, smirking in an amused fashion. Naruto then stepped forward and bent down a bit, placing a tender kiss against her forehead. Nothing to apologize for, Hinata-chan. You can do that anytime. Naruto spoke in a reassuring manner, before nuzzling his nose against hers in a little Eskimo kiss after pulling his luscious lips from her forehead. By now Hinata's face was burned bright red. She just nodded her head in a dumbfounded way. Oh okay, she whispered with a satisfied little smile on her face. Naruto chuckled at her before stepping away and looking over to Sasuke, who just watched the scene with mixed feelings. The connection he currently had to his chakra was suppressing how embarrassed he'd normally feel, so he just watched without looking away, snapping only back to attention when Naruto called out. Are you two ready? Naruto called out while looking from Sasuke to Hinata. They both again realized that they were supposed to be sparring before nodding their heads in a dumbfounded way. Naruto raised a hand in front of his mouth while releasing another sultry bit of laughter, his long sleeve still dangling past his fingers, the fabric being too long. Then you can start when you are ready. Don't be afraid to take your time. The point of this is more to exercise with your new restrictions rather than try to win. We'll be training this way a few hours a day from here on, Naruto instructed while looking to them expectantly. Hinata and Sasuke both nodded before walking towards each other with intense strain. Naruto cocked his head to the side and watched with interest as the two seemed to spar in slow motion. From across that stream, Kyuubi and Midnight still cuddled together in their standing position as Hinata and Sasuke went back to training under Naruto. Kyuubi thought out loud. Midnight let her gaze linger on the training for a while before turning around in Kyuubi's arms, the girl lifting her own arms up to wrap around Kyuubi's neck. The two demons were in their humanoid forms as normal. Kyuubi still towered over the smaller Midnight, being about 6 feet tall. Midnight, still growing, was about 5 feet tall. Kyuubi wore a red kimono today. The fabric hugged around her ample hips. Wrapped around her waist was an obi which was wrapped in a very large bow. Similar to Naruto, Kyuubi's body appeared to be gift-wrapped. Kyuubi, who was very in tune with her sexuality, had no problem with wearing revealing clothing, so the top part of that kimono was open enough to reveal a good deal of Kyuubi's cleavage, the motherly figure being generously gifted in that fashion. But Midnight wore clothing much more modest, still wearing those tights black cargo pants, fishnet top with her sports bra visible underneath the thin fabric of the fishnet top. Being full demons, the two engaged in their standard ritual again. Kyuubi had no problem moving both her clawed hands underneath Midnight's rump and lifting her up. Midnight didn't miss a beat, wrapping her legs around Kyuubi's waist. Within seconds, Kyuubi had Midnight pinned up against a tree, the two demons staring hungrily into each other's eyes. While he did give her a kiss on the forehead, Kyuubi commented matter-of-factly, continuing their previous conversation. At the same time, Kyuubi placed a sensual lick along the inside of Midnight's furry ear. That touch caused a small shiver to trail up the black-furred demon girl's spine. But he kisses everyone that way, including you and me. It's like I thought. He isn't ready. He's really quiet, the late bloomer. Even Hinata is ready, Midnight commented while trailing her fingers up the side of Kyuubi's head to entangle her digits within the long silky strands of the taller woman's red hair. Both their hair was ass length, styled in the same way. Most of their hair fluttered in the breeze, just hanging loosely, but also some of it was braided into a crown around their heads. I suppose it will just take time. When he's truly ready, he'll make it pretty clear, Kyuubi whispered in a husky voice while biting firmly into the tip of Midnight's ear, the red-furred demon fox woman releasing a lustful growl. By now Midnight had her eyes closed, shivering as Kyuubi began to grind her hips sensually against Midnight's pelvis. The anticipation is killing me, Midnight cooed in a dreamy fashion. Kyuubi let out a sultry chuckle at that admission. Me too. Thick lashes fluttered open tiredly, a small yawn leaving a small boy's mouth. Naruto woke up on this dewy morning, the sun barely rising above. He nuzzled his face into something warm, soft and fuzzy as he awoke. As the blurriness faded from his tired eyes, Naruto got a good look at a pair of large breasts his head was currently resting against. But the teen wasn't surprised at all. On the contrary, he was quite used to such a sight, for they belonged to his beloved mother. Kyuubi laid on her side along the grassy field of Naruto's favorite clearing. She was in her humanoid fox fur, laying completely naked with Naruto cuddled tightly against her curvy form. One of her 9 tails was wrapped around her pelvis, covering her privates. Her breasts, however, were fully uncovered. But despite her nakedness, there was no sexual tension between her and her son. That's just how demons were. Naruto was completely naked as well, one of his golden fox tails wrapped around his pelvis in the same way. They were both cuddled up together in a tight embrace. Kyuubi had her slender arms wrapped around Naruto's waist in a possessive hold. His waist was skinny, and despite the power he'd achieved, Naruto had little muscle to show for. His form was quite feminine in fact. Naruto continued to grow into a more feminine figure every day because of his mother's influence. His hips were exceptionally wide, his shoulders were very slender and narrow, his body was skinny yet held womanly pudge. And of course his face had changed quite a bit into softer features. His lashes were longer, lips poutier, jaw less defined. He was pretty, and it was getting harder and harder to hide it. In fact, he now had to use a henge jutsu in order to hide his features at school. Back to that embrace, Kyuubi had began to stir as Naruto woke, the woman's legs grinding a bit as soft sleepy coos left her mouth. Her thighs were grinding against Naruto's because they slept with their legs entwined together. Kyuubi's eyes fluttered open softly, only to be greeted by the wide demonic red eyes of Naruto, who was currently looking up to her with a dreamy, happy expression. "Good morning, mother," Naruto cooed in a soft, sensual voice. By now Naruto couldn't help the way every word he spoke sounded so enticing. But of course Kyuubi was used to it because she spoke in the exact same way. A small smile crept across the woman's face. "Good morning, sweetheart," Kyuubi whispered back while leaning down to nuzzle her nose against Naruto's, giving him a little Eskimo kiss. Naruto tilted his head back and closed his eyes, enjoying the sensation of her nose rubbing against his. After speaking those words, the two went silent against. Naruto let out a soft breath when feeling his mother's hold tighten around his waist. Kyuubi gave him an affectionate and tight squeeze, to Naruto's delight. Naruto nuzzled his face even more into her breasts, using them as a cushion before casting his gaze back up to her eyes. He looked onto her face silently with an adoring expression, and Kyuubi looked down at her son's face with the same adoration. They stayed that way for at least an hour, remaining within each other's tight embrace without saying a word. This was a common occurrence between the two. Kyuubi and Midnight took turns cuddling Naruto. Sometimes they both would cuddle with Naruto at night, but this time Kyuubi laid claim as was her right. Midnight was nowhere in sight for now. Today was Naruto's day off. At school, despite revealing his true self to Sasuke and Hinata, he maintained his dope mask. He wasn't quite ready to reveal himself. Naruto still wanted to test the waters with how Sasuke and Hinata were coping with his changes. After that hour of their silent, obsessive staring, Kyuubi finally moved. Her remaining 8 large red fox tails were wrapped around Naruto's body, engulfing him and keeping him held close. Her grip on his shorter figure tightened again, the woman squishing her son's body into her own. Naruto arched his back slightly and closed his eyes, sighing in comfort. Kyuubi was still quite a bit taller than Naruto since the teen was still growing. She leaned down to nose into the top of his head, nuzzling her face into his curly blonde hair. The demoness then began to place soft licks of her small tongue atop his head in a massaging manner. Naruto couldn't help releasing a very subtle and barely audible series of purring noises. As a fox demon, Naruto could purr. Those gentle licks continued for a long while, the woman bobbing her head over and over again in a rhythmic motion. But soon Kyuubi's licks moved to the side slightly, over to the fluffy golden fox ears sprouting from atop Naruto's head. Kyuubi ran her tongue along the tip of that ear, down the lobe, to eventually place licks directly against the pink inner flesh. The attention forced a sharp gasp from Naruto, followed by a sudden shudder which shivered up his spine. The boy damn near melted under that treatment. When witnessing that response, Kyuubi couldn't help releasing a sultry chuckle. She knew just how to drive her son crazy. Those licks inside his inner ear continued, the woman lavishing the flesh and saliva and breathing calmly directly into his ear. The sound of her breath so close and intimate relaxed Naruto, that tongue massage nearly putting him into a comatose state. His entire body was squirming now as little tingles of pleasure trailed through his entire feminine form. Naruto had his delicate hands placed restfully along Kyubai's shoulders. His grip tightened, the boy clinging even closer to her form as that tongue massage continued. If possible, he moved even closer to her, wanting there to be absolutely no space between their naked bodies. As the two continued their morning cuddle session, soft footsteps could be heard approaching not far away. But even though Naruto and Kyuubi sensed the person, neither gave a reaction. Within a few moments, Midnight revealed herself, walking out of the nearby brush to enter the clearing. She had a bushel of grapes in her furry black hands. "Morning, Kayu-chan, Naru-kun," Midnight stated in a pleasant manner while walking over to the two, dropping to her knees, and bending down to place a small kiss against both their cheeks. Kyuubi cast a half-lidded gaze towards Midnight, stopping her licking for just a moment to speak. But the woman kept her lips pressed against the inside of Naruto's ear, speaking in that sensual manner of hers towards Midnight. "Morning, dear. Find any good berries this morning?" Kyuubi questioned before immediately going back to tonguing into the inside of Naruto's ear. Naruto opened his mouth to speak, but instead a soft gasp of pleasure escaped his throat, interrupting his words. Midnight raised a brow, staring down as Naruto's face began to tint a subtle red shade. The sight was very enticing to the fox girl. I can't get over how much better the food is here," Midnight stated casually before getting up and stretching a bit. She then placed the bushel of grapes directly above Kyuubi's head in the grass before standing. "Any plans for today?" Midnight asked while walking towards the stream. She was already completely naked. "Hinata wants to spend some time with me today since it's our day off," Naruto finally responded with his eyes closed. His breath was hitched as he spoke, the constant attention from his mother nearly driving him inside. Midnight glanced back at the two with an inquisitive gaze, letting her eyes linger on the way Naruto was writhing beneath Kyuubi. He was like putty in her hands. Midnight made a mental note of just how sensitive Naruto's ears were. "Oh, exciting. You should call it a date." Her face would redden like a tomato, Midnight stated playfully with a devious smirk gracing her face. Naruto couldn't help letting out a soft bit of laughter. "You're probably right. I might do that, but I don't want to tease her too much," Naruto explained before suddenly gasping and arching his back further when Kyuubi let out a feral growl and bit into his top ear, but not to cause pain, more in a dominant and animalistic way. The effect was a shock of pleasure coursing through Naruto's body which drew a visible response. Midnight couldn't help staring at the scene as she backed into the river to take a bath. "Oh, I'm sure Hinata could take it. She obsessed. I know the look," Midnight explained while moving back into the river just enough to begin floating. Naruto still only responded back in a strained whisper, his eyes closing again as he buried his face into Kyuubi's chest and panted slightly, his cheeks flushed red from the constant loving attention he was receiving. Kyuubi was making it very hard for him to have a normal conversation. And of course Kyuubi was doing this on purpose. She had a devilish smirk on her face the entire time. Her son was so adorable. "We'll see if she'll call it a date. I don't care either way," Naruto stated in a genuine manner. Midnight nodded from the side, just continuing to watch Naruto and Kyuubi bond. Midnight by now was completely okay with Hinata's advances towards Naruto. That little pep talk she received from Kyuubi had cleared her foggy mind. And after spending so much time under the guidance and tutelage of Kyuubi, she'd gotten back to her demonic roots. It had been a few months now since Naruto revealed himself to Sasuke and Hinata. Hinata's was growing more bold in her advances, but Midnight just watched from the side. Honestly, Midnight liked Hinata and wouldn't mind if the two ended up together. But Naruto still hadn't showed any real romantic interest towards the Hyuga. Who Naruto would choose was still completely up in the air. After a few more minutes of that loving attention, Kyuubi finally pulled back from Naruto's ear and rolled over onto her back so Naruto was laying on top of her. Naruto now kicked his feet playfully while looking up at her with an adoring gaze in his demonic red slitted eyes. "It's almost time for your date, sweetheart," Kyuubi cooed while slowly rubbing circles into the small of Naruto's back. Naruto canted his head to the side and quirked a brow. "Date, huh? Are you trying to push me towards Hinata, mother? That's a bit surprising coming from you. I would have thought you'd favor Midnight." Naruto pressed while laying his head down sideways so that he could rest his cheek along the soft cushion of Kyuubi's right breast. Kyuubi shook her head softly. "I don't have a preference really, but you have to admit, it sounds like a date." Kyuubi pressed on in a casual manner. Naruto let a soft smile grace his luscious lips. "If that's the case, then I'd better get ready." Naruto responded in a sultry manner, that soft smile growing into an amused smirk. Kyuubi looked down at her son with an intrigued expression before a matching smirk spread across her mouth as well. My thoughts exactly. A little while later, Naruto stood in his bathroom staring into his reflection in the mirror, his arms raised, the boy running a large wooden comb through his long, curly mane of blonde hair which fell down to his ass. The teen was wearing a white kimono which was neither male or female. Kyuubi had made it herself, being Quiet the tailor. The woman had many skills she'd developed in her years. That kimono hugged his body in all the right areas to show of his curvy figure, but also the fabric was cut low around the top, partially revealing Naruto's smooth, slender shoulders. The sleeves were a bit long and hung over his hands slightly. As Naruto brushed through his thick locks, he suddenly released a sharp gasp from a pressure around his waist. Not so tight. I like breathing, you know. Naruto whined with a little pout spreading across his lips. Kyuubi was standing behind him, fastening a golden obi around his waist, currently tying the large ribbon into a bow. Oh, don't be such a baby. Gotta show off those hips. That's half the art of seduction. Kyuubi murmured while glancing down at the way the lower half of the kimono clung to Naruto's ample hips and ass just right. She finished up the knot before raising her hands to place them along the soft skin of Naruto's exposed shoulders, placing her head next to Naruto's and leaning down a bit to rub her cheek against his, staring now into both their reflections in the mirror. Kyuubi was finally dressed, wearing a dark red female kimono which was a similar design to Naruto's. Her shoulders were revealed as well, but the front of her kimono was open enough to reveal a good bit of her cleavage, her covered breasts squishing against Naruto's back as she pressed against her son from behind. Naruto glanced to Kyuubi's face from the corner of his eye. I'm not trying to seduce her. Plus she seems pretty seduced already and I haven't even done anything, Naruto explained in a huff. Kyuubi just rolled her eyes and turned her head in order to place a wet smooch against Naruto's cheek, her slender fingers rubbing delicately along his shoulders. You haven't done anything. You've been yourself around her. That's plenty. You're my son. She never had a chance. Kyuubi continued to tease while moving her arms down now to wrap around Naruto's waist and tug his body back even closer to hers, hugging him in a possessive manner. Naruto closed his eyes to enjoy the embrace, raising up one dainty hand to softly slide his fingers against the side of Kyuubi's face and caress her cheek in a delicate manner. Naruto's touch was soft, sensual, slow and graceful, just like his mother's. His hands were smooth, nails trimmed perfectly. After a moment, Naruto's eyes fluttered open to gaze back into the mirror. His eyelashes were naturally long, his face much more feminine than masculine by now. He was beautiful, and it was no wonder Hinata couldn't resist. I may break her heart. The anniversary is in a week. I suspect she'll ask me to take her to the festival, Naruto whispered softly, which caused Kyuubi to quirk her brow in interest. Are you afraid of breaking her heart, or are you afraid that she'll see the real you and not be able to hand it? Kyuubi questioned. Naruto hesitated before turning his head away and casting his gaze off to the side. I don't know, Naruto admitted. Kyuubi nodded her head before reaching a single hand up to lightly touch Naruto's cheek and turn his head back to face her. If she can't handle who you are, then fuck her and everyone else. You shouldn't be afraid to be yourself, and anyone who can't deal with that is not worthy of you, Kyuubi stated with an intense gaze, her voice confident, commanding, but reassuring. Naruto couldn't help the subtle smile that graced his pouty lips. Always such the pep talker, Naruto replied back in amusement. Kyuubi let out a sultry chuckle before moving her face closer to nuzzle her nose against his, giving her son a little Eskimo kiss. That's my job. Now we have a bit of time before you're expected to meet with the girl. Why don't you give me a few twirls? Model that outfit for me. I spent a lot of time on it, you know, Kyuubi insisted while reaching off to the side to open the door to the bathroom. She then pulled Naruto along with her, slapping the boy's plump rump so he would move forward into the living room. Naruto jumped a bit and stepped forward as Kyuubi expected. With soft steps, Naruto moved to the center of the living room and turned around to face his mother. Kyuubi was leaning her weight on one side as she stood, her arms wrapped around her belly while looking to her son expectantly. Naruto had his arms wrapped around his belly, leaning his weight on one side as well, standing just like his mother. So needy, Naruto teased before spreading his arms out to opposite sides of his body and twirling around to model that outfit for his mother's pleasure. You love it, Kyuubi responded back in a sultry way while staring at the way Naruto's kimono fluttered around due to his graceful twirling. Maybe. Hinata moved through the thick foliage of the forest with tentative steps, her strides short and careful. She avoided puddles of mud and any dirt that might tarnish her current attire. The little Hyuga moved with her hands pressed against her belly, fidgeting with the fabric of her top. She was looking straight forward, a look of worry clearly evident in her expression, but today was a special day for her. Today she had dare she say it, a date with Naruto. So this morning she wore something special. Adorned Hinata's tweenage body was a white kimono decorated with intricate lavender floral designs. The fabric of that gown flowed down to her feet where she wore sandals she rarely ever used. Wrapped around her waist was a large decorative obi that squeezed around her waist to accentuate what little curves the girl had. She even had a little flower tucked into her purple hair. The outfit she wore was for traditional ceremonies, but today she took it out of her closet for this occasion. Again, she'd snuck out of the house without being seen to avoid any questions. An easy feat because it was her day off and nothing was expected of her, at least for the morning. Hinata walked through the forest to the place she was supposed to meet Naruto. This location was a little closer to Konoha than Naruto's usual clearing. Hinata had chosen where to meet because she planned on taking him into town since they'd never done so before. They always spent time at Naruto's clearing. After a time of walking, Hinata finally came to the meeting place, a large field with a wooden bench placed in the middle of a trail, the trail oftentimes used by joggers. Hinata's breath hitched in her throat when seeing Naruto sitting atop that bench alone. She damn near froze at just the sight of him. He was gorgeous. Naruto currently sat with both his thighs squeezed together. One of his hand rested atop his lap while he used his free hand to toss individual grapes at a number of squirrels that had gathered at his feet. The boy had a pleasant smile across his face. Hinata's eyes widened when seeing his beautiful smile. She could barely handle just how irresistible he looked. In fact, she didn't move from her spot until Naruto finally gazed onto her. The boy canting his head to the side and looking at the girl with a warm expression. "Morning, Hinata-chan," Naruto said in a sweet voice while rising from his seat and instantly wrapping his arms around his belly, leaning most of his weight on one hip. Naruto let his eyes unabashingly move up and down her robed form. "That is a very pretty kimono," the golden-haired boy commented in a sultry manner. Hinata hesitated for a moment, trying to calm herself down before finally moving forward to Naruto. "Morning, Naruto-kun," Hinata replied in a small stutter. She'd gotten better with talking to Naruto in the past few months. She's been spending time with him. But there were still times where she could barely get the words out. Hinata bit into her bottom lip before suddenly leaping at Naruto and wrapping her arms around his neck. She crashed her lips against his in a passionate kiss. Naruto smirked when seeing Hinata's leap, opening his arms wide before securely hugging his arms around the girl's waist. The kiss, as always, was entirely one-sided. Hinata pressed forward, clutching the back of Naruto's head with one side while Naruto stood still and allowed himself to be kissed. This had been going on for some time now. When Naruto gave Hinata permission to kiss him anytime she wanted, Hinata took that to heart. She kissed him as much as possible. Naruto never resisted but never returned her passion. Hinata let that kiss linger for a time, tasting of Naruto before finally pulling back and lowering onto her heels. She always rose up on her tippy toes to kiss Naruto even though Naruto wasn't that much taller than her. She were almost the same height, in fact, due to Kyuubi's influence. When she pulled back, Naruto still maintained that subtle smile. "Are you ready to leave, Hinata-chan?" Naruto asked. Hinata just nodded her head before moving to Naruto's side and reaching for his hand. This was a gesture Naruto had no problem reciprocating. He met her hand halfway, entwining his fingers were her. Hinata always enjoyed just how soft and smooth Naruto's hands were. I wanted to take you to a few places," Hinata said while beginning to walk down the jogger's trail towards Konoha. Immediately a subtle frown grew along Naruto's brow. Something Hinata didn't miss. "In the village?" Naruto questioned tentatively. Hinata looked over to Naruto and nodded, squeezing his hand affectionately. "Yes, I know you have a problem around large crowds, so I thought we'd go to places that wouldn't have a lot of people there. Especially not at this time of day," Hinata said in a reassuring voice. Naruto stared at her with his bright blue eyes before nodding. "Okay, Hinata-chan," Naruto stated softly. Hinata leaned over and placed a small kiss against Naruto's cheek, trying to relax him. She could tell he was a bit tense. "It'll be okay. I'll be with you the entire time," Hinata whispered as they headed into the village. In the time that they'd been training together and spending time with one another, Naruto had yet to tell Hinata the reason he didn't like to go into the village. He didn't lie to her, he just chose not to talk about it, something Hinata respected. So Hinata just assumed Naruto was nervous around crowds. Since Naruto seemingly spent so much time alone, it was reasonable for her to assume that Naruto was simply a recluse. She knew he was an orphan that lived by himself, so it made sense to her. There was no way for her to know that the reason Naruto didn't like being around the villagers was because he was the infamous demon child who most of the adults hated. But Hinata was true to her word. They stuck to the outskirts of the village, small shops, seeing a few local sites that usually attracted some tourists at other times of the year. A typical date. One of their final stops was another one of Hinata's favorite shops she liked to visit. It had many finely crafted pieces of jewelry that she liked to admire. She rarely actually got anything, but Hinata was a Hyuga, and the daughter of the head of the Hyuga clan, so the owner never complained. Naruto received very little attention so far, but still some. They'd moved so quickly through the village and to so many lightly populated area that not many had time to recognize him. He really did look quite different from the orange jumpsuit wearing dope. Hinata led Naruto into the shop holding his hand. She had a small bag of items she'd purchased that day. Naruto wasn't carrying anything. Hinata could tell the boy was quite nervous the entire day. He was constantly fidgeting. Hinata may not have noticed, but despite her best efforts, Naruto had gotten a few glares from some villagers who managed to recognize him. He hadn't said anything though, but his reaction was very obvious to her. "This is actually one of my favorite stores. The people here are very nice," Hinata said to Naruto, drawing his attention. He looked over to her with a tentative smile. "Of course, Hinata-chan," Naruto stated simply. That response caused Hinata to gain a concerned look on her face. She squeezed his hand affectionately once more and turned to face him, stopping in her tracks. "We don't have to go in if you don't want to," Hinata said while standing in the middle of the door to the shop. Naruto shook his head and sighed lightly, calming himself. "It's okay. This place does look nice like you said," Naruto said in a soft whisper. Hinata just nodded, leaning over to plant a small kiss against his lips before leading him into the store once more. As soon as they passed through the door, a bell rang above their heads to signify the presence of customers. As soon as that bell rang, a person standing behind a counter, looking down at a newspaper, lifted her head. It was a middle-aged woman adorning her own formal kimono. She spotted Hinata and instantly her face brightened into a smile. "Hinata-chan, it's so good to see you, dear. I have received many new designs, I'm sure you'll be." But the woman stopped mid-sentence as she noticed Hinata walking forward with Naruto in tow. Hinata was smiling brightly at the woman as she approached the counter, but Naruto could tell by the look of the woman. She knew. "Who is this Hinata-chan?" the woman asked in an idle voice, trying to hide her suspicion. "Oh, hello Miko-san. It's good to see you. This is Naruto. We are on a date," Hinata said as a harsh blush spread across her cheeks. Hinata's admission that they were on a date drew both Miko's and Naruto's attention. "A date? How exciting," Miko said with a pleasant smile while gesturing towards the wall on the far side of the shop. "I hope you two don't get into too much trouble. Now would you like to see our new stock?" the woman asked while gesturing with a hand towards the wall. Hinata nodded her head politely before turning on her heels to head towards the wall, tugging Naruto with her. "Thank you, Miko-san," Hinata called out excitedly. As Naruto was tugged along, he turned his head to look back at Miko. A lump formed in his chest from the way the woman was looking at him. The middle-aged woman held a deathly harsh glare towards Naruto. The woman's teeth gritted as she suppressed rage. Then Naruto felt it, the emotions of the woman as his eyes connected with her. He felt her rage, her sorrow as she recalled someone she lost to Kyuubi's attack. Like so many other villagers, she blamed Naruto, and saw him as no different than the demon that harmed the people she cared for. And her pain translated into pure hate. And Naruto could feel it all as if his own. The feeling was overwhelming. He clutched his chest and began to shake visibly, tears beginning to form in his eyes. She wasn't the first to look at him in that way today, but every new person that did so hurt all the same. One of the few downsides about being a demon, the connection to others. Kyuubi and now Midnight had gotten rid of their connection to the humans due to how much they despised them. As Hinata looked through the new pieces of jewelry on display, Naruto tried to control his emotions, but he could still feel it. The woman was glaring daggers into the back of Naruto's head, and he no longer needed to look at her to feel it. Once the connection was established, it lasted for quite a while. From behind her fluffy black tail, Midnight was staring at the woman, literally seething with rage. "I'll murder her, rip her fucking eyes from her skull," Midnight growled out telepathically. Naruto just bowed his head. "That wouldn't solve anything," Naruto stated solemnly. "I don't fucking care. If she keeps looking at you that way, I'll... Midnight continued to seethe, starting now to emit a thin veil of red chakra. But before the demonic aura became visible, Naruto spoke up once more. "Please, Midnight, don't. Just don't," Naruto whispered in a barely audible fashion, this time out loud. Hearing his words caused Midnight to stop the demonic chakra from flowing out, her attention turning to Naruto now. "I'm sorry, Naruto. I just can't keep watching them hurt you," Midnight explained. Naruto nodded his head in understanding. Hinata, hearing Naruto whisper something, finally turned her head around curiously. What did you say, Naru? But Hinata stopped in the middle of her sentence when seeing Naruto's face. It nearly brought her to tears. She dropped the jewelry she had in her hand and moved both hands forward to cup Naruto's cheek. What's wrong, Naruto? Hinata blurted out in alarm. She could see the sadness and pain in his eyes, in his expression. It was heartbreaking. And the worst part was she didn't know why. Naruto wrapped his arms around his belly, casting his eyes away from her in shame. Naruto hesitated now. What was he to say to her? How could he explain what was going on? He didn't want to lie to her, so he just closed his mouth to silence himself. Please tell me. I'm sorry I brought you here. I should have paid closer attention. I'm sorry, Naruto. Please forgive me, Hinata said while quickly grabbing Naruto's hand and pulling him along and leading him out of the store. Thank you, Miko-san, for letting me see your recent products, but I have to go now, Hinata blurted out as she rushed Naruto from the store. Of course, Hinata-chan. Next time try not to bring the demon with you, the woman called out before gasping and quickly closing her mouth. Upon hearing those words, Naruto flinched and Hinata stopped in her tracks. Slowly she turned her head to look back at the woman in disbelief. What? Hinata asked in a near breathless voice. What did she mean? But the woman simply looked down at the newspaper she was previously reading, avoiding Hinata's gaze. The adults weren't supposed to talk about Naruto being the demon carrier. Oh, nothing. I just meant. Never mind. It was nice seeing you, Hinata-chan, the woman explains quickly before going silent. Hinata stared at the woman for a long while, a look of complete confusion in her eyes. She then looked over to Naruto to see the boy looking away, still trying to hide his pain. Please ... let's just go, Hinata-chan, Naruto whispered in a barely audible voice. Hinata watched Naruto for a time before nodding and leading him out of the store. She looked back once more to the woman before the doors to the store closed, catching one final glare that Miko was sending her way. No, that glare wasn't aimed at her. It was aimed at Naruto. Hinata was quick to lead Naruto out of the village. They were both completely silent as they made it back to the bench they started the day at. When they finally arrived, Naruto pulled his hand away from Hinata and turned his body a little to the side, now having both arms wrapped around his belly. He looked away from her still. Hinata fidgeted with her fingers a bit while watching him, not knowing what to say. Naruto, Hinata began but was quickly cut off by Naruto. Hinata, I'm sorry you saw me this way today. I know I ruined our date, Naruto whispered solemnly. Hinata just shook her head and moved a hand up to touch lightly along Naruto's shoulder. That touch caused the boy to flinch a bit, making her pull her hand back. Can you please just tell me what's going on, Naruto? Hinata pleaded while reaching both her hands up now to cup Naruto's cheek. He flinched again, but that didn't deter Hinata this time as she moved his head gently so his face was facing hers. Naruto still averted his gaze, looking off to the side. I can't, Naruto responded shortly, pain evident in his voice. Why not? Hinata questioned while scanning his face. Please look at me, Hinata continued, finally causing Naruto to move his bright blue eyes to her face, looking directly into her lavender orbs. Tell me, Hinata insisted once more, in a softer tone now. Naruto gazed upon Hinata for quite a time, biting into his bottom lip as he contemplated his response. I'm not ready, Naruto confessed. Hinata nodded in understanding, still staring at him. Can you at least answer one question? Miko-san, when she spoke about a demon, was she talking about you? Hinata questioned in a tentative manner. That reminder caused Naruto to once again tear his eyes from Hinata. No, don't look away. Please just look at me. Was she talking about you? Hinata asked again. Naruto complied with her insistent demand, looking her in the eyes again, but this time Hinata could see the tears welling up in those bright blue orbs of his. Yes, Naruto stated in a breathless manner. Hinata's mouth widened in shock for a moment before her face scrunched into rage. She pulled away from Naruto and turned around on her heels. How dare she? What reason could she possibly have? Hinata yelled out in anger as she prepared to storm back into that shop and give that woman a piece of her mind. But before she could, the girl was stopped in her tracks as Naruto grabbed her by the wrist. Don't, Naruto whispered, a response which drew a shocked expression from Hinata. But that's not right, Naruto. Is that why you don't like crowds? Because people are mean to you. Why? Because you are an orphan. What gives them the right? Hinata was yelling now, the girl filled with rage clearly. From behind that black foxtail wrapped around Naruto's neck, Midnight watched the scene in interest. I am really starting to adore this girl, Midnight confessed. Those words caused Naruto to let out a small bit of laughter, completely throwing Hinata for a loop. Almost instantly Naruto's mood lightened. Now that he wasn't around any villagers, he didn't feel their hate, and he could be more easily consoled. Naruto stepped closer to Hinata and looped his arms underneath her shoulders, engaging her in a small hug. Hinata still held a shocked expression on her face, but she wrapped her arms around Naruto's torso, pulling him into an even deeper hug. Those people are idiots. I'm never going to their store again. They can't stop us from enjoying ourselves. I won't let them, Hinata stated defiantly. Naruto just nodded, his head buried into the crook of her neck. Naruto's posture was a little less than perfect now because of how vulnerable he had been feeling. So at the moment he was actually a bit shorter than Hinata since his frame was slightly hunched. You don't have to do that, Naruto said in a muffled voice because of the way his face was buried in her neck. Yes, I do. And then I'm going to take you to the festival that's happening in 2 days, Hinata stated in a resolute manner. Those words drew an audible gasp from Naruto, who lifted his head up and looked to her with a shocked expression. He shook his head frantically. No, I can't. There are. Naruto sputtered, but before he could continue his rambling, Hinata placed a kiss against his lips, effectively silencing him. Naruto went wide-eyed but gave no resistance as usual, the boy clutching lightly into her shoulder. Hinata pulled back after a while, staring intensely into his eyes. I won't let them stop us from having fun. I'm guessing you've never been to the festival. It's a lot of fun. Almost everyone will be there. You deserve to go, and just because some stupid people don't like you doesn't mean you should be denied that fun, Hinata said before leaning forward to plant another kiss against Naruto's lips and pulling entirely away from him now. The sun was starting to go down and she needed to get back home. Hinata took a few steps backwards while looking at him. You'll be my date, and if anyone says or done anything mean, they'll have to deal with me, Hinata said with a resolute nod while turning around and walking off. She walked now with her posture much more upright, her demeanor far more confident than usual. It seemed that protecting someone she cared about had triggered something in her, a strength she didn't know she had. Naruto watched her walk off with a dumbfounded expression, completely silent. When she dropped from view, the boy fell down on his knees and stared at the spot where she had been. Oh dear, Naruto whispered. As he did so, the black scarf around his neck sprang to life, the fox underneath that black tail hopping off of Naruto's shoulders to land on the ground in front of him and transform into the humanoid form of Midnight. Midnight had her back turned to Naruto, placing one hand along her hip as she looked down the trail towards where Hinata had walked off. She's got heart, I'll give her that, Midnight said while turning around to look down to Naruto, who was still staring down at the ground dumbfounded. You know, you could have just said no, Midnight stated while shaking her head. But as she said this, a plume of blue fire erupted from behind Naruto, and out stepped the curvy form of Kyuubi. She kneeled down behind Naruto and wrapped her arms around his body. They were all comfortable being out in the open because they could sense any human coming from miles away, and no human was around that would spot them. I think Naruto is finding it hard to say no to a sweet person like Hinata. Of all the things I've taught you, I think I've forgotten to teach you how to set boundaries, dear. Kyuubi cooed directly into Naruto's ear as her hands squeezed securely against Naruto's belly. She tugged his body back into hers and leaned her torso forward, her covered breasts squishing against his back as she nuzzled her cheek affectionately against the side of his face. Again, a thing he was used to from his mother. They just didn't want to disappoint her. She's so kind to me, Naruto whispered in a defeated manner while placing his dainty hands over his mother's. Kyuubi nodded in understanding while kissing gently into the side of Naruto's neck, a sign of affection which served to calm Naruto's nerves. He raises a small hand up to sweep his blonde hair out of her way, and tilted his head to the side, giving her full access to his flesh as she showered him in kisses. Midnight moved forward and dropped down on her butt in front of Naruto, and Kyuubi, hugging her knees to her chest. You still have time to say no. The festival isn't for 2 days, Midnight explained while watching Naruto and his mother idly. Kyuubi had now dragged Naruto down to the ground, the two now laying on their side with Kyuubi spooning Naruto from behind. She still delivered those kisses to the side of his neck while their legs began to entwine. Naruto had his eyes closed, the boy squirming and releasing soft, relaxed breaths. Every time I try I just can't, Naruto explained in a worried tone. Midnight stared on in thought, before nodding. Then you'll need to prepare yourself for the consequences, Midnight warned in a serious tone, causing Naruto to open his eyes and look to her with concern evident in his gaze. He looked away in thought, refusing to look at her. Midnight watched him with an intense gaze, her eyes never faltering. After all, it will be the 12th anniversary of Kyuubi's attack on Konoha, Midnight commented in a dull tone. Kyuubi tore her gaze away from Naruto for just a second to gauge Midnight's behavior. The girl was clearly concerned and taking this very seriously. But somehow that didn't bother Kyuubi much. Midnight and Kyuubi exchanged glances before Kyuubi began to trail kisses up the side of Naruto's head to finally bit into the tip of her son's ear, drawing a soft gasp from the boy. "Come now, dear, you're worrying my boy to no end. I'm sure he'll be ready. And if he's not, well, isn't that why you are here?" Kyuubi questioned before delving her tongue deep within Naruto's ear while at the same time clamping her lips down around the outer lobe. This caused Naruto to gasp and close his eyes, the boy completely distracted now from the topic at hand, as was Kyuubi's intention. Kyuubi maintained an intense gaze on Midnight as she tended to her son. Midnight understood that look and nodded. "Of course, Kyu-chan." Midnight responded obediently. A satisfied smirk played across Kyuubi's face when hearing those words from the girl. "Good, die demon," shouted a chorus of voices surrounding a small figure. "Kill him, kill him." The voices continued on. Dark shadows with blank faces encroached on a small child dressed in orange. They continued to yell abuse incoherently, hate spewing from their mouths. The small boy, no older than 7, stood alone in the middle of the crowd, the target of their ire. I'm sorry," the child whispered to himself fruitlessly. No matter what he said or did, it never changed. They never changed. The boy covered both his ears with tiny hands, his tiny malnourished body trembling. His eyes were squeezed shut, not wanting to see their angry expressions. Eventually, however, like always, he opened his eyes only to see a shady figure towering above him holding a knife. The figure held a knife and was already mid-swing, bringing the blade down towards the boy's face. Before the tip connected with flesh, the dark red slitted eyes of Naruto snapped open, the tween awaking from his slumber. Naruto laid in the same clearing he always did, sleeping along the dewy grass as the full moon shone bright in the sky. His skin was covered in sweat, his heart racing. The boy's vision was blurry as he was awakened so suddenly from that nightmare. Even after his eyes were given a moment to adjust, Naruto's vision was still blurring. He had been crying in his sleep. Naruto raised one dainty, clawed hand to gently wipe away his tears, trying to stay as quiet and as still as possible so he wouldn't disturb those sleeping with him. Behind him was a very warm body, his mother's arms wrapped securely around Naruto's midsection as she spooned him. Her chin was resting just above his head, her 9 fluffy foxtails enveloping Naruto and their other sleeping companion, a certain black fox who had seen everything. Midnight in her humanoid form was cuddled close against Naruto's naked body. As always, the demons slept completely naked, nothing but their tails to cover their sex. Midnight's face was level with Naruto's, her eyes closed as Naruto calmed himself. Despite her closed lids, the girl had been awake for quite some time, monitoring Naruto and feeling his pain. Slowly, thick lashes fluttered open to reveal huge, pitch black eyes. Midnight now gazed upon Naruto's distressed face, silently watching him as he composed himself. Midnight watched him with a blank expression. She'd learned to hide just how concerned she was. It only served to upset Naruto further. After a moment to wipe his face clear of tears, Naruto now stared back into Midnight's dark orbs. They just laid there, staring at each other, not a word said. This was a rather common occurrence, Naruto's nightmares. When Midnight first witnessed it, her concern, while appreciated by Naruto, only served to make him feel guilty. He didn't want anyone to suffer because he was suffering. Naruto blamed himself, believing that his attachment to humanity was the cause of his pain. Despite the influence of his mother, despite how cruelly he had been treated, Naruto still cared for the humans of his village, still cared about their hate, still found himself seeking their approval, their love, even after all this time. After several minutes of that constant staring, Midnight began to shift from her lying position. She detangled her legs from Naruto's and slowly removed her arms from his body. The demon girl leaned forward to place a gentle kiss against Naruto's forehead before rising from her lying position and walking towards the nearby stream. Naruto watched her every move, his eyes following her as she departed. He didn't move right away though, the boy looking down in shame. Reaching the edge of the stream, Midnight stopped to gaze down at her own reflection. After a while of standing alone, soft footsteps were heard approaching from behind. Midnight didn't react until she felt arms snaking from behind her to wrap around her midsection. Naruto then rested his chin along her shoulder, the boy moving in to close any distance between their naked bodies. His pelvis pressed against her butt, still his tail the only thing covering his privates. "I'm sorry, Midnight," Naruto whispered solemnly. Upon hearing those tender words, Midnight gritted her teeth in frustration. "Don't," she retorted in a heated tone. Naruto could tell her anger wasn't directed at him. "I still am," Naruto insisted while squeezing his arms even tighter around her body. He clung to her form needily, as if she'd float away forever if he let go. Midnight took a moment to calm herself before clasping her fingers around Naruto's and turning around in his arms. Once they were facing each other, Midnight took both Naruto's hands and brought them up to her lips, kissing the back of his hands gently. Since Midnight had arrived on the human plane, she had grown and matured, in body and in mind. At first, Naruto was taller than her by a few inches, but now they were the exact same height. Despite their height being the same, Midnight was looking down upon Naruto as she kissed his delicate hands. Their posture and demeanor couldn't have been any more different. Midnight stood tall and upright, wanting to appear strong for Naruto during these times where he was most emotionally vulnerable. Naruto, however, maintained a meek and subdued position, his slender shoulders slightly hunched inward. His head was bowed, shame still evident on his brow. Naruto's hands were shaking as she kissed them. She held him and treated him like a delicate flower which would break with the weakest touch, even though Midnight knew that Naruto in terms of power was far stronger than herself. Midnight let that kiss linger for a moment before lowering Naruto's arms down and guiding them around her waist. She then trailed her black furred fingers across Naruto's face gently, snaking those digits through the thick, silky blonde hair flowing down his head before settling both her palms on the back of his head. Without hesitation, Naruto dipped his head forward, resting his forehead just underneath her chin, his face buried in the comfortable nook of her developing breasts. Naruto was trying and failing to suppress soft whimpers as a new set of tears stained the girl's fur. Midnight cradled Naruto's head in a motherly fashion, nuzzling the side of her fox-like muzzle into Naruto's hair. She understood. She was one of the few in this world who did. She knew everything about him, saw what he'd been through, what he still goes through, feels what he goes through as if she were experiencing it herself. As Midnight cradled him, she could feel his shame, guilt, sorrow, anger at himself. They stood there at the edge of the stream for a long while. The entire time, Midnight was staring through the forest, past the trees, woodland creatures, dirt and rocks to cast her seething gaze on the source of Naruto's pain. Naruto's pain. That damn village. A snarl grew along Midnight's face, the girl baring her teeth, her face and muzzle wrinkling in a way that only a ferocious predator could. I'll make them pay. That morning, bright blue eyes stared at its own reflection, the figure running a large brush through a huge mane of blonde hair. Naruto stood in front of a giant mirror tendering to his appearance. The mirror was sprouting from the ground, a mirror of his own demonic creation similar to the one he made when he first became a demon. The boy was still fully naked as he groomed his long, knee-length hair. Even completely naked, it would be rather difficult for anyone to recognize Naruto as a boy. Today was his 12th birthday and he'd recently been going through puberty. Unlike other human boys who began to grow taller, have deeper voices, grow hair in unexpected places, Naruto's growth was slightly different due to his demonic blood. He continued to grow in the image of the person that was closest to his mother. If possible, his hips had gotten progressively wider. Despite his strength, there was very little muscle visible on his feminine form. Even his bone structure had changed, allowing for narrower shoulders, a more rounded face, slender legs, and a tinier torso. His delicate figure held a good bit of womanly pudge. His eyelashes were naturally long and thick, hands and feet much more small and dainty than they should have been for a boy his age. Finally, there was his voice. The loud, annoying voice of Adobe was long gone. His voice was quiet and noticeably a few octaves higher than his male peers at school. Naruto's voice was smooth, soft, angelic. Given his age, it was very easy to mistake him for a flat-chested preteen girl. Whoever Naruto was when he first met his mother, whoever he was going to be without her influence, that person was very different from the boy who proudly called himself the son of Kyuubi, the nine-tailed demon fox. As Naruto continued to prepare himself for the day, he felt a sensual grope to his amble behind. A black furred paw slapped against his right ass cheek before teasing fingers began to glide up Naruto's hip. The smack caused Naruto to jump a bit before a small pout grew along his luscious lips. He looked at the reflection of Midnight slowly cuddling him from behind, a devilish smirk playing across her face as skinny arms wrapped around Naruto's belly. She let out a feral growl while placing gentle little nips into the side of Naruto's neck, making him squirm. At the same time, while keeping one arm wrapped around his midsection, Midnight's free hand began to feel along his body. Her palm glided along his smooth belly and flat chest, a pleased purring hum emanating from her throat. "Happy birthday, gorgeous," Midnight whispered huskily directly into Naruto's ear. He was in his human form currently, so it was rather easy for Midnight to transition from his neck to his ear. By now Naruto was putty in Midnight's arms, the preteen not quite prepared for such a sensual onslaught. Midnight had learned quite a lot from observing Naruto's interaction with his mother. She'd learned just how to push Naruto's every sensitive button. Thank you, Midnight, Naruto whispered shakily, his lower lip trembling as a heavy blush grew along his cheeks. My, aren't we growing bold? Came a sultry voice from off to the side. Kyuubi now approached the duo, watching them in amusement. The woman was fully dressed in a red kimono, already prepared for the day. She sauntered over to the mirror, the woman tall enough to lay her forearms along the top of the mirror from behind it and looked down upon the two tweens. Didn't I tell you not to torture my boy too much? You trying to corrupt my child? Kyuubi questioned in a stern yet still amused voice. Being full demon's Midnight was of course fully sexually mature. Kyuubi knew that and did her best to protect her, still half-human son, from such things since he was still a child by human standards. Demons were another story altogether. Midnight looked up to Kyuubi with a confident smirk, something which caused Kyuubi to raise a brow in interest. If anything, Midnight intensified her sensual groping and teasing, raising a hand to forcefully yet gently tilt Naruto's head to the side. She then bit deeply into the side of his neck enough to draw blood before lolling her tongue outward to lavish his skin in her sticky saliva, licking up the red liquid. Naruto flinched and gasped quietly, the boy taking a submissive posture as his body was ravished. Just a bit of innocent fun before his big day. Midnight commented matter-of-factly before placing a hand along the side of Naruto's face and turning his head in order to engage him in a hungry kiss. Naruto's eyes widened from Midnight's forcefulness, but he gave no protest, instantly melting under the treatment. The arm that Midnight still had wrapped around Naruto's waist began to apply pressure in order to turn the boy around. Naruto got the hint, following her non-verbal command before raising both his scrawny arms up to wrap around Midnight's neck and intensify the kiss. With a pleased growl, Midnight's tongue snaked outward, invading Naruto's lips and taking his tongue hostage. To say that Naruto was a bit overwhelmed would have been an understatement. Naruto had an entranced look upon his face, the boy letting out hot panting breaths as his thighs began to grind together in a bother. He'd kissed people before, but this was different. This was a real kiss. Naruto gazed upon Midnight's face for a time in infatuation, his heart fluttering. This feeling was different, new, exciting. Why hadn't she done this before? Whatever the reason, Naruto was clearly enjoying himself. Perhaps a bit too much. Midnight peered at Naruto's pretty face with a haughty expression, the girl clearly pleased with his response. She'd wanted to do this for so long but had chosen to bide her time and wait for the right moment. Naruto's birthday was as good a time as any, especially since she could sense how nervous he was about his date with Hinata today. She wanted to take his mind away from it all. His thoughts and feelings had been rather dreary ever since his last date. After a few moments of relishing that kiss, Midnight looked up towards Kyuubi with a confident gaze, emboldened by Naruto's responsiveness. Midnight stared straight at Kyuubi as if to say, "Try and stop me." Kyuubi tilted her head to the side while watching the two make out, catching Midnight's defiant gaze as the girl took advantage of her son. She's definitely growing bolder. Still being a virgin at her age, it must be torture. Kyuubi mused to herself before walking from around that mirror and taking a few sashaying steps towards the couple. Kyuubi stopped in front of them and placed 2 fingers against Midnight's forehead. With a small flick of her wrist, she sent Midnight flying backwards away from Naruto, causing the girl to land on her back harshly. Naruto fell backwards from the force of that push, though Kyuubi caught him with her tails. Without looking at Naruto, Kyuubi leapt forward, landing on top of Midnight, grabbing the girl's wrists and pinning them above her head. Midnight was a bit stunned by the entire series of events, laying on her back atop the grass and staring up at Kyuubi in a dazed fashion. "You need to control yourself, darling," Kyuubi instructed before lowering her body down over Midnight's, pressing her lips against Midnight's fluffy fox ear. "He's not ready," the woman whispered warningly. Despite that tone, Midnight just narrowed her eyes before suddenly slipping her wrists away from Kyuubi and leaping forward, grabbing the older demon's shoulders and tackling Kyuubi to the ground. Their positions were now reversed. Midnight pinned Kyuubi's wrists above her head, the smaller demon straddling the woman's waist. Midnight licked her lips, looking down with a hungry expression. "Then you'll have to satisfy me for now," Midnight stated in a haunting tone as her hands trailed down Kyuubi's belly, pelvis, hips, before slipping underneath the fabric of the older woman's kimono. Within seconds, Kyuubi arched her back as a soft gasp escaped her lips. From off to the side, Naruto leaned back against the mirror with a wide-eyed gaze, staring in astonishment at the two. Midnight looked up towards Naruto, that devilish smirk never leaving her muzzle. The intensity of her gaze made Naruto shiver. Watching his own mother be ravished was something the boy wasn't quite ready for. Kyuubi took a moment to snap back to her senses before looking at Naruto with an upside-down gaze. The details of their activities were hidden from his eyes, but this wasn't exactly something he should be seeing. not at his age. Naruto's eyes were fixated on them. She could tell that her son was enjoying this. Kyuubi couldn't help releasing a small chuckle before raising her arms up to wrap around Midnight's neck. We are distracting him from getting ready for his big day, Kyuubi stated simply. Midnight shifted her gaze to the woman beneath her for just a moment before returning her vision towards Naruto. Midnight brought a free hand up and placed 2 fingers against her lips, blowing a saucy kiss towards Naruto. Naruto couldn't help blushing like a schoolgirl before returning the gesture, placing 2 manicured digits against his own lips and blowing a kiss back to her. Midnight's grin grew wider, a look of satisfaction on her face before a blue flame suddenly enveloped both her and Kyuubi. In a flash they were gone from the clearing, off to finish their business in private. Naruto stared blankly at the spot they had just been in a second ago before dropping down onto his butt with his back gliding down the smooth surface of the mirror. He had a dumbfounded smile plastered across his face, the boy still managing to have held onto the brush, currently cradling it in both hands and holding it close to his chest. He bowed his head and took on a more tender smile. "Thank you," Naruto whispered. That whole series of events had done a lot to calm his nerves. Midnight could sense how nervous he still was since in a few hours he would be with Hinata at the festival. For the first time since he was a child he was going to go to the festival. Slowly Naruto rose back to his feet and turned to face the mirror. He stared at his own reflection silently for a time before taking a deep breath. The blonde then went back to brushing his hair. He was as ready as he was going to be. Large lavender eyes of an adolescent girl stared into a mirror, her small hand raised up to apply a thin layer of mascara against her lashes. After a moment that hand disappeared from the mirror's field of view before reappearing holding a stick of light purple lipstick. It was carefully applied to her thin lips. The girl rubbed her lips together and smacked them softly before staring at her reflection for a few long moments. Was she ready? The girl's fingers fidgeted endlessly. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath before those lids snapped back open, a resolute express gracing her tweenage face. She gave a determined nod before turning around and exiting the bathroom she was in. The girl was about to leave her room, placing her small hands along the handle of her door before freezing and turning her head around, scanning her room. How could she forget? Laying on her bed was a small paper bag. She quickly made her way over to grab the handle of the bag, checking the contents one last time with a satisfied smile before turning about and finally leaving the room. This would be the day. Today Hinata would make Naruto hers. It didn't take long for Hinata to get to the place where she'd meet up with Naruto. The village was a lot less busy since most people were at the festival. She ran through the empty streets for a while before jumping up and traveling from roof to roof. Even though it was just noon, she could already hear the festival events beginning. For now, she ignored it to focus on getting to her destination quicker. When approaching the spot near that familiar bench where she'd often meet Naruto, Hinata began to slow down, now walking along the trail which was usually frequented by joggers and those living on the outskirts of the village going into town for work and business. The closer she got to the bench, the more nervous she became. Her grip tightened on the paper bag, her breath hitching in her throat when finally spotting the silhouette of a petite figure off in the distance. Despite being several yards away from the figure, Hinata showed immediate recognition. There he is, Hinata thought to herself anxiously before reaching into the paper bag to take out a small, decorative object. A mask. The mask Hinata took out was similar to a mask worn at masquerade balls, except the purpose of the mask was related to the festival. It was to memorialize the shinobi that died protecting the village from Kyuubi, so people wore a decorative version of those people's faces or their bloodlines. Hinata wore a mask of a Hyuga. Many Hyuga died during the attack 12 years ago. It was a generic mask of the eyes of a Hyuga's Byakugan flaring. The veins of the eyes were multicolored. The mask covered the top half of the face but left the mouth exposed. Hinata put it on, a strap wrapped around her head to hold the mask in place. This one was one of the more expensive masks, something easily obtained for a girl of Hinata's means. Other lower quality masks were sold during the festival. As she got closer to Naruto, Hinata slowed down even further, taking her time to take in his figure since it didn't seem like he noticed her. Naruto's back was facing Hinata. He wore a kimono as usual, an attire of his mother's design. It was white with a golden obi wrapped around the waist. While most kimono were rather baggy to allow the wearer to breathe, this one wasn't. The fabric of Naruto's outfit hugged his skin. Kyuubi wanted to make sure that all of Naruto's unnatural curves were highlighted. Hinata couldn't help letting her eyes trail down his body. Since he wasn't facing towards her, this was a rare opportunity to indulge her perverted thoughts. The girl found her eyes lingering on his butt, which was really accentuated by the tightness of the silky garment Naruto wore. Hinata was only snapped out of her staring when Naruto began to turn around. Immediately she shot her eyes up to look at his face, a bright red blush already staining her cheeks. Seeing his face did little to quell the fluttering in her chest. Oh gods, he is so beautiful, Hinata thought to herself as Naruto's face was revealed. He was as pretty as ever, a warm smile gracing those kissable lips of his. The boy's long, knee-length blonde hair hung freely. A few strands were braided into a crown and fell out in front of his face just enough to the side to not obscure his vision. His hair was like a golden veil that made his face glow. Being in his human form, Naruto's bright blue eyes gazed happily upon Hinata, his smile widening sweetly as she neared. His hands were rested gracefully against his belly, perfectly manicured nails and slender fingers entwined. Naruto squinted his eyes joyfully as he called out to his date. "Hello Hinata-chan. You look very pretty today, that mask really suits you." Naruto spoke in that angelic voice of his which, upon hearing it, made Hinata's knees weak. She was wearing a kimono as well, hers much more traditional. Her attire was light purple, matching her makeup, embroidered with white flowery designs and a darker purple obi wrapped around her waist. Today there were 2 silky flowers adorning her hair, hanging off the top of her head like panda ears. "Thank you Naru-kun," Hinata stated in a gentle tone before stepping in front of him and raising up on her tippy toes to deliver a swift kiss to his lips. Naruto responded as he usually did, pursing his lips for the kiss but otherwise not returning her passion. This behavior of his never went unnoticed by the Hinata. Despite going on dates, despite kissing him and hugging him, she knew he hadn't accepted her as his girlfriend yet. She intended to change that. As she pulled back, Naruto found himself staring inquisitively at the mask. He then looked into her eyes expectantly. He knew she would answer his unspoken question. They'd really gotten to know each other in the months that they had been friends. "It's for the festival," Hinata explained while bringing a hand up to swipe a bit of her lavender hair from her face so Naruto could get a perfect view of it. "It's pretty," Naruto commented sweetly. This made Hinata smile as she reached into the paper bag to fetch the other object. "I know you are nervous about today. I still don't know why, but it's obvious that there is something between you and the people of the village. I've never seen that side of them. I didn't know they treated people that way, especially not children. Is it because you are an orphan? I thought that might be it, but I realized that you didn't actually answer me the first time I asked," Hinata questioned, speaking a mile a minute as she clutched the hidden object in the bag. Looking into Naruto's eyes, she could see the subject was upsetting him. His warm smile became strained, though he still maintained it. Those big blue eyes of his began to trail off as he thought about how he should answer. His fingers began to fidget, the boy biting into his own bottom lip. But before he could speak, Hinata shook her head and dropped the bag. She reached both her delicate hands forward to cup Naruto's cheeks. Naruto was still a bit taller than she was. "It's okay. You don't have to answer. It's okay," Hinata whispered tenderly before leaning in to engage him in another soft kiss. Hinata's voice served to soothe Naruto's nerves, making him much more responsive to this particular exchange. Subtly, Naruto placed all the fingers on one of his hands against Hinata's belly, his nails lightly scratching and caressing the fabric of her obi. While Hinata suckled against his bottom lip, Naruto watched her with a half-lidded gaze, a foreign feeling finally welling up inside of him. She was so tender and supportive. But what if she found out? Naruto thought to himself as he stared at her reassuring face. This was something that Naruto dwelled on constantly. Getting close to someone only for them to leave if he ever opened himself up. Why wouldn't they leave? How could any human stay after learning what he truly was? Naruto was so caught up in his own thoughts that he didn't even notice how long the kiss went on for. When he snapped back to his senses, he had both his arms wrapped completely around Hinata's waist, hugging her close as small dribbles of saliva began to leak out the side of their mouths. Hinata was in heaven, staying silent as Naruto progressively deepened that kiss on his own. She knew him well enough to tell that he was lost in his thoughts, but she wasn't going to stop him. By the time they pulled back, Hinata was panting slightly to catch her breath, her face painted redder than it probably had ever been. Her tongue dangled a bit past her lips, mouth parted slightly as she looked on adoringly at her crush. Naruto was rather surprised at his own behavior. It seems that despite his doubts and insecurities, his body seemed to be a bit more decisive. When seeing the look Hinata was giving him, a subtle blush spread across his cheeks, though he didn't look away or release her from his hold. "Did you bring me something?" Naruto asked seemingly out of the blue, using the subject to gather himself. Hinata smiled wide, rubbing her fingers through the hair on the back of her head. She nodded her head and gave a simple response. The girl hummed, trying to enjoy the feeling of Naruto's secure and tender hold for as long as possible. Naruto could see what she was doing, the realization causing him to release a knowing chuckle. "Are you going to show me?" he questioned with a devilish smirk crossing his face. Hinata could tell by his response that he knew what she was doing. Hinata responded back shortly once more as her arms tightened around Naruto's neck. She wanted him to kiss her again. Naruto let out another small chuckle before dipping his head forward and engaging her in a little Eskimo kiss. Silly, Naruto commented before pulling his arms away from her waist and planting a smooch against her forehead. Hinata had a look of mild disappointed, but despite her defeated expression she reached down to grab the bag. I was thinking that maybe if people didn't recognize you then you'd feel more comfortable. Hinata continued while pulling out an intricately designed mask from the bag. This one was a bit bigger than the one she wore. It was a mask of the Aburame clan, the same clan that Shino was a part of. It had colorful insect decorations that spread out into a repeating pattern like the tail of a peacock. The wings of the mask folded outward and locked in place. It was one of the flashier masks. Naruto looked at it with wide eyes, excitement clearly evident in his expression. It was so pretty. He'd never wore something like it. He'd never gotten to be a part of the festival. Naruto had to stop himself from reaching out and tearing it from Hinata's hands. He caught himself mid-grab, pulling his hands back in a show of restraint. Hinata was a bit taken aback by Naruto's response. This was a new side to him. "Do you like it?" Hinata asked while unfolding the insectoid wings of the mask and holding it up so Naruto would get a good look. Naruto couldn't help the goofy smile plastering his lips. "Yes," he replied simply. Hinata was grinning so brightly now that it made Naruto finally gaze away, as if she'd learned some big secret about him. She took a step forward and turned the mask around, carefully placing it against Naruto's face and wrapping her arms around his head to secure the strap. The mask fit perfectly. It was even large enough to cover his cheeks to obscure his notable whisker marks. Hinata pulled back to get a good view of Naruto in that mask. "How do I look?" Naruto asked sheepishly, a bit nervous since this was completely new to him. Hinata wouldn't tell him, but the mask he wore was meant for girls. Most masks were gendered. This one was brightly colored to be purple and pink with different shades of green decorating the background. With that mask combined with Naruto's kimono, the boy looked like a true diva. It even matched the black scarf he wore around his neck. Hinata took a while to answer, a bit stunned by just how good Naruto looked with that mask. She didn't ignore the fact that Naruto was a bit more feminine. Well, a lot more feminine than his dope act in class. At first she didn't know how to feel about it, but she had begun to really adore this version as much if not more so than the boy she originally fell for. Despite his choice of attire, his calm and graceful demeanor, he was still Naruto in her eyes. Hopefully soon to be her Naruto. It took her a while to speak up, but when she did, it was in a dreamy, infatuated manner. "You're perfect, Naru-kun," the girl whispered softly. Hearing those words made him freeze up as a shock hit his system. Naruto raised a single hand to place gently over his own chest. His heart was throbbing. He looked down for a moment, the boy's voice caught in his throat. When he looked back up, a small stream of tears were trailing down his cheeks. "Thank you, Hinata-chan," he replied back sweetly. Why was she so good to him? Hinata stepped forward to close the distance between them, reaching a hand up to wipe Naruto's tears away. It was harder with the mask, so she simply lifted the mask up enough to help. She stared into his bright blue eyes with her giant lavender orbs before laying her head across his shoulder. "You're welcome," Hinata stated tenderly before reaching down to entwine her fingers with his. Holding hands now, Hinata began to lead the way towards the village with Naruto standing by her side. Naruto moved closer to her, giving her hand an affectionate squeeze. Hinata looked rather pleased with herself, returning the squeeze as they made their way down the path and finally, towards the festival. It didn't take them long to move towards the festival area of the city. The progressively loudening noise of the events were a good sign. They just had to follow the music. Hinata could tell that Naruto was getting more nervous as they got closer. She was having an internal battle with herself as she contemplated turning around. It was clear to see, even behind that mask, how distressed he was. Still, she thought this would be good for him. He'd always been a loner. Before she and Sasuke entered his life, the only friend that Naruto seemed to have with Iruka. Thinking about the life he led and how closely it mirrored her own as far as she knew. Well, if she could help him, maybe she had to try. The couple rounded a corner heading through an alley. The sun was still bright in the sky, so the alley was illuminated. This seemed to be the quickest route. In fact, they could see a large crowd gathering in the distance. Naruto squeezed Hinata's hand tightly, catching her attention. She shifted her gaze over to him before finally coming to a stop. Moving in front of him, Hinata raised a hand to snake under his mask and caress his cheek. "We don't have to go. We've already come far enough. I shouldn't have pressured you so hard," Hinata whispered tenderly in a shaky voice. Seeing Naruto like this was heartbreaking. He was trembling. Naruto didn't respond immediately, the boy looking past her towards the crowd visible down the alley. He clenched into the fabric of his kimono along his thigh before closing his eyes. After a moment, Naruto fluttered his lids open, holding his head high. "Thank you, Hinata-chan, for everything," Naruto said before walking past her, still holding her hand, though he didn't walk away from the crowd but towards it. Suddenly Naruto burst into a sprint. The speed in which he moved caused a sudden high-pitched squeak of surprise to emit from Hinata. She stumbled a bit but quickly caught her balance, following slightly behind Naruto at full sprint. Naruto turned his head slightly to the side before giving her a sweet smile. Seeing that smile made her heart warm. "He's so strong," she thought to herself in admiration before the two finally exited the alley to join a huge crowd of people. Almost as soon as they left the alley, an eruption of fire shot high up into the air, the source coming from the center of the street. There was a huge parade going on. The streets were filled with dancers, actors, children and adults alike. Most were in costume while those who weren't were simply watching from the side. The flames were still roaring from a large figure. Naruto and Hinata both turned their heads to assess the situation. Upon seeing it, Naruto's eyes widened. In the middle of the parade was a giant float made in the image of Kyuubi. It was at least 30 feet tall. It was in the shape of Kyuubi's giant fox form, 9 tails thrashing behind it, controlled by a few puppeteers dressed in red. The head of the fox was the most intricate. Its mouth was wide open and periodically a huge plume of smoke spewed from the fox's mouth. There was clearly someone inside the float using a fire jutsu. "Since when did I breathe fire?" came the annoyed voice of Kyuubi from inside Naruto's mind. The tone of her voice forced a tiny little giggle out of Naruto. He raised a sleeved hand in front of his face to hide his laughter. "Don't you dare support this," Kyuubi continued on in a heated manner. This caused Naruto to begin laughing even harder, drawing a shocked expression from Hinata. She stared at him blankly for a while but couldn't help laughing with him. She didn't know why she was laughing, but seeing Naruto be so jovial was very refreshing. Wanting to enjoy more of Naruto's lively spirit, Hinata tugged at Naruto's hand and led him to the front of the cheering crowd so they could get a closer look. Periodically fireworks would erupt above the float's head, as if it were attacking the crowd. The crowd went wild with every blaze. The parade was going towards a specific direction. Naruto and Hinata moved with the crowd, following the events. Eventually, the float settled in a large square that had been cleared out for this occasion. As the fox float entered the square, a series of men and women in shinobi outfits revealed themselves in a dramatic fashion. They then had a mock battle with the fox, hurling fireworks in all directions. Naruto was mesmerized by the display. It was so dramatic despite the subject matter. It was beyond anything he'd ever seen. Hinata mostly paid attention to Naruto rather than the show. She'd seen this many times before, so she knew the routine almost by heart. Everyone did. Despite that, people loved it all the same. The tale of the evil 9-tailed fox's attack and the brave men and women who stood up to it. This was one of many events which memorializing the bravery and victims of that day, of which there were hundreds. Naruto knew of that day. He'd seen it through Kyuubi's own eyes, experienced it through her own memory. He knew why she attacked. Seeing the big mock battle was something otherworldly for the boy. He held his hands to his chest delicately and eventually began cheering with the crowd to Hinata's surprise. Inside the cage, Kyuubi brooded, mostly about the quality of the representation of her. She of course had a clear memory of that day, but it had been something that she dealt with in a different way. Her priority today as Naruto's mother was to make sure he had a good time. She didn't want to upset him by showing him how much that day mattered to her. So she joked and spoke to him in a light-hearted manner, making him laugh. She always knew the best ways to make her son happy. Eventually, the battle began to die down with the fox float having taken out most of the shinobi actors, many of them dying rather dramatically. As the fake Kyuubi began to win, there began a series of boos from the crowd. Soon, however, the crowd began to chant, "Minato, Minato, Minato." The crowd continued. Upon hearing those words, Naruto froze completely. Hinata was joining in on the chanting until she witnessed Naruto's reaction. Seeing him caused her immediately alarm. She reached over to grab his hand and give it a squeeze. "Are you okay, Naru-kun?" she asked in a worried tone, trying to speak above the roar of the crowd. Naruto didn't respond back immediately, the boy seemingly lost in his thoughts as he stared off into space. "Naruto, Naruto," Hinata shouted in alarm while walking in front of him and placing both of her hands along his shoulders and shaking him lightly. As she did that, there was a huge explosion of fireworks, this time the area near the fox statue filled with smoke. Naruto stared past Hinata, completely in a daze. "My father," Naruto repeated in his head, staring forward unmovingly. At this point, Hinata was panicking. He wasn't responding to her. What was wrong? Hinata activated her Byakugan to inspect his body. She didn't notice anything immediately. She stared on at him until a booming voice resounded around the area. "You will go no further, demon. I won't let you harm another soul." The booming voice shouted as out from the smoke a giant frog float appeared. It was just as big as the Kyuubi float, except on its head a man stood in full costume. He had his arms crossed, a determined expression on his face. As soon as he appeared, the crowd went wild. "Minato!" they screamed hysterically. Naruto gazed upon the man with a wide-eyed expression. He searched his memory, or more accurately, his mother's memory, to recall the face of his father. This man looked a bit like the real Minato, but he was clearly an actor. Still, Naruto was mesmerized all the same, watching as the man took a fighting stance and started performing jutsu. As he did that, the frog float was guided forward by wheels at the bottom, a few puppeteers guiding its movements. Hinata felt helpless at this point. Naruto was completely ignoring her, but he seemed to be okay. Tracking his eyes, she could tell he was paying close attention to the mock battle. Calming herself down, Hinata grabbed Naruto's arm and leaned against him, turning towards the fight. Unlike every year, she was rather uninterested in it. Instead, she kept a close eye on Naruto. Naruto barely blinked the entire time during the event, watching the intricate way in which the two floats and the man battled. There were more fireworks, puppeteers controlling the fake Kyuubi's tail to lash out at the frog. There was even yellow confetti being thrown to signify the yellow flash, Minato's signature move. The actor held a silver ball in his hand as well, signifying another move he was famous for, the Rasengan. When the actor used those fake moves, people in the crowd would call it out excitedly. The battle ended with Minato being impaled by one of the fox's tails. It seemed hopeless, however the man had a smile on his face. "You may be strong, but you can't defeat the power of hope," Minato called out before making seals with one hand. As he did that, a few puppeteers guided fake hands from Minato and grabbed the fake Kyuubi's tail. "Demon, I banish you back to the vile pit of hell you came from. Begone!" the man shouted as a pain-filled roar was heard from the fox. A cloud of smoke consumed the area. When the smoke dissipated, the fox was gone. Minato grinned in satisfaction before turning to the crowd. "Remember those who fell this day, and live well," the actor said before falling over. A few tears were visible in the crowd as the ceremony ended. Though before everyone left, the actor got back up and joined the many of the members of the parade. They bowed to explosive applause. Naruto had watched the entire thing in absolute silence. As the crowd began to disperse, Naruto finally snapped out of his daze, feeling a pressure along his hand. He looked to the side to be met by a pair of worried, lavender eyes. Hinata stood by his side the entire time, waiting for him to snap out of whatever trance he was in. Hinata stared at him silently, not sure whether he was ready to talk. Naruto felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He was so fixated on the fight, the memories, it was as if the entire world disappeared. Naruto bowed his head, wrapping his free arm around his own belly. Hinata was still holding his other hand. "I'm sorry," Naruto whispered solemnly. Hinata shook her head before releasing his hand, only to engulf him in a warm hug, rubbing her cheek against his. "It's okay. How are you doing?" she questioned carefully, hoping to not do anything to set him off. Naruto slowly wrapped his arms around her waist and nuzzled his face into the side of her neck. "I'm okay. I'm sorry I worried you." Naruto apologized again, causing Hinata to pull her head back and stare sternly at him. "Stop that. You have nothing to apologize for. There are still more events if you want to continue, or we can leave now. Whatever you want, Naru-kun," she whispered softly while raising a hand to gently caress his cheek. Naruto leaned the side of his face into her palm, closing his eyes and releasing a pleased sigh. "Maybe one more," Naruto whispered before fluttering his lids open and gazing towards her adoringly. This meant more to him than she could possibly know. Hinata nodded her head before raising up on her tippy toes to deliver a gentle kiss. This time Naruto was eager to respond, pressing forward and squeezing her body even tighter. Hinata then took his hand and guided him through the crowd. The next event wouldn't be for a while, so she decided she'd show him around. There was a lot to see, to do, games to play, things to buy. A true festival. As the two disappeared into the crowd, there was a group gathering a little ways away. They didn't move with the crowd, the group's gaze following Naruto and Hinata as the couple disappeared. They appeared to be ordinary citizens, nothing disquishing about them, men and women alike. They did have one thing in common, however. They heard Hinata calling out Naruto's name. One man walked in front of the group with his teeth gritted, a scowl across his face. He turned to the others to see similar expressions. Wordlessly, they nodded their heads before moving to join the crowd, their random faces blending in with the other citizens.
I will continue this story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.